After that, in 2011, an unusually heavy spring rain flooded part of the pine forest south of Barron County. The same place everyone once believed had been searched thoroughly. The rain washed away a thin sheet of topsoil, peeling it back like paper and revealing a small piece of metal catching sunlight in the mud. A deer hunter named Carl Jennings was the first to notice it. He thought it was trash, a beer can, maybe a shell casing, until he crouched down and brushed away the dirt clinging to it. It was a car hood, blue, very old. Jennings reported it to the sheriff's office. 2 days later, the forest that hundreds of people had combed through decades earlier was wrapped in yellow tape once again. Investigators returned with metal detectors, ground scanners, and a familiar sense of caution, the kind learned from years of hope followed by disappointment. But this time was different. Only about 60 meters from the dirt road, buried beneath mud and a web of roots, they found another piece of metal. Then another. And then, at a depth of over a meter, they hit the body of a vehicle, a blue Honda Civic. The license plate was faded, the paint peeling, the doors almost rotted off. But when the forensics team levered the frame up, they saw something that made the entire crew fall silent. In the back seat, wrapped in decayed fabric, was a rough canvas bag, and inside it, the brown leather notebook everyone at the university remembered Audrey always carried. The discovery was kept secret for 4 weeks, until DNA tests confirmed it. And then, at last, after 21 empty years, a sentence the May family thought they would never hear again finally echoed. "We found Audrey's car." Harold May sank onto the front steps when the officers told him. He didn't cry right away. He just stared at the porch light, the same light he'd replaced more than 30 times over 2 decades, and whispered, almost to himself, "She tried to come home." It took another 6 months to reconstruct the scene. Experts believe the car had been forced down the slope with tremendous force, hitting a tree and flipping several times before being swallowed by soil and debris over time. There were no brake marks, no signs of a last-minute turn. But one detail chilled investigators. The driver's side door was open when they found the car. There was no explanation. No one knew whether Audrey opened it herself or whether someone else did. No one knew how long she survived after the fall. No one knew why, in 1994, hundreds of searchers had passed within just a few dozen meters and still missed everything. A distance close enough to hear someone calling for help. If only. But no one heard a thing, not a single person. When the case was reopened, no new leads surfaced. The dark-colored pickup remained a ghost. The gas station witness had passed away the year before, and the land that had kept it secret for more than 20 years offered nothing more. All that remained was an emptiness, a path home swallowed by darkness, a girl who tried to return but never made it, a porch light that stayed lit until the very end, and a question that hovered between 2 generations of investigators. What really happened between that gas station and the night ahead? It's a question Kentucky still carries a thin scar that never fully heals. That night, the small, peaceful town lay quietly at the foot of a misty mountain range. The streets were still lit by their familiar yellow glow. Each street lamp stood motionless, casting a pale light onto the road like the faint breath of a town drifting into sleep. Everything was calm. So calm that no one could have imagined that just a few hours later, a young woman would vanish from this world without leaving a single trace. Her name was Audrey, 21 years old, the kind of girl whose smile you'd remember even if you only met her once. Audrey wasn't the type to cause trouble. She was the kind of person who helped you fold your jacket when you forgot where you left it. The kind who stopped her car in the middle of the road just to pick up a lost stray cat. In small American towns, people like Audrey were often seen as the sunshine of the community. But on that final night, that sunshine was snuffed out abruptly, as if an invisible hand had choked it silent. The last moment anyone saw Audrey was when she left her apartment. A few neighbors said they heard the door close soft but firm. No yelling, no hurried footsteps, nothing unusual. Just a girl in a blue jacket, hair tied neatly, holding her keys with a star-shaped keychain. She stepped outside and slipped into the darkness. That was it. And then, She disappeared. Her car was still parked properly in its spot. Her phone left in her room. Her wallet exactly where it always was. No signs of a struggle. No sign anyone had broken in. It seemed like Audrey had stepped out just to take in some night air like she always did. But this time, she didn't come back. The scene unnerved many people when the police described it. Because it didn't look like a runaway, not a kidnapping, not like any scenario detectives had seen in countless case files. It looked like Audrey, dissolved. As if a figure had been erased from space without leaving its outline. Audrey's mother was the first to realize something was wrong. She knew her daughter always texted before bed. Something simple. "I'm home, Mom." But that night, her phone stayed silent. She sat waiting on the old sofa, the living room lights still on, her hand wrapped around a cup of cold tea. Every 5 minutes, she checked the screen, hoping a message would appear. But it never did. And the uneasiness inside her kept growing until it turned into real fear. When police arrived, they started with the usual questions. Did Audrey ever disappear before? Was she upset? Was she having issues with anyone? But Audrey's mother shook her head. Audrey wasn't the type to leave the house without telling someone. She never had. And they knew that was true. A young officer drove around the neighborhood at dawn. He said he stopped under a flickering streetlight at one point. Dew still covered the road. No footprints, no tire marks, nothing. He stared into that empty space, and for a moment, he felt like the town was hiding something. Something it was afraid to say out loud. Where did Audrey go? What made her walk out that night? And more importantly, who was the one that made sure she couldn't return? The next day, missing person flyers were posted all over the grocery store, gas station, and post office. Audrey's smiling face became a painful reminder that behind every disappearance is a real person, a real family, a real grief, not just words on a newspaper, not an anonymous case. She was a real girl, with dreams, with plans, with someone waiting for her to come home. But time passed, and the scariest part wasn't that they didn't find the culprit. It was that they didn't find anything. No weapon, no witnesses, no camera footage, not a single clue strong enough to even begin an investigation. The entire town felt suffocated. But now, people locked their doors earlier, looked over their shoulders outside, whispering to each other that something dark had touched their town. The streetlights still glowed, but Audrey wasn't there anymore. And from that moment on, everyone knew this wasn't just an ordinary night. It was the beginning of one of the most haunting mysteries the town had ever witnessed. A mystery that months later, when the truth finally surfaced, would show that Audrey's disappearance was only the start of a chain of events no one could have imagined. The morning after Audrey vanished, the police assigned the case to lead investigator Michael Harris, a man in his 40s, tall and thin, with a face that always seemed tired, as if he had seen too much in life. But his longtime colleagues knew, once Michael took a case, he never let go. He would stay up nights, tear apart every detail. He was one of the rare investigators who believed that each disappearance was a cry for help from someone waiting to be found. When he stepped into Audrey's apartment, Michael stood still for a few seconds. The room was surprisingly neat, the bed made perfectly, books lined up on the shelf, a half-finished cup of coffee on the table, the foam already sunken. No chaos, no items disturbed, nothing suggesting a struggle. Someone vanishing like this made him feel something was off. He opened Audrey's desk calendar. The day she disappeared was marked with a small note. Meet Mom late evening. She didn't seem to have unusual plans. Just the typical errands of a young woman in a small town. He recorded every detail. Because in his experience, the smallest things were often the real keys. Next step, check the cameras around her building. But it was disappointment after disappointment. The supermarket camera was blurred by night fog. The street corner camera angled the wrong way. The only camera that caught Audrey showed her leaving the building and turning onto a side street near the parking lot. After that, she vanished from all footage. Investigators hated gaps like that, gaps where the truth got swallowed. Michael spent the morning knocking on neighbors' doors, An elderly couple remembered hearing soft footsteps in the hallway, but they insisted it was Audrey's usual sound whenever she took out the trash or returned mail. A mailman said she always smiled when receiving packages. A college friend said Audrey liked writing in a journal. But when Michael searched, there was no journal anywhere. Something didn't add up. A girl who loved writing left behind no written trace. He wrote that down. Another empty space. By late afternoon, Michael returned to the station to file the first report. The pressure weighed on him. Missing person cases always felt like time was moving faster than usual. One slow step could cost the last chance. While he worked, Audrey's mother was brought into the waiting room. She sat hunched, gripping her daughter's jacket, eyes red. When Michael approached, she asked only one question: "Is my daughter still alive?" It was the question he hated most, because he knew he had to tell the truth, but the truth was fragile. In the end, he answered with a steady, low voice, "I will find your daughter, no matter what it takes." She broke down not because of the answer, but because, in his voice, she heard the determination she desperately needed. On day 2, Michael expanded the investigation. He visited the university where Audrey studied. Friends described her as introverted but kind. No enemies, no danger. A professor said Audrey had an unfinished essay and had asked for an extension. That caught Michael's attention. A girl, aware of deadlines, asking for extra time, meant something was distracting her. But what? No one knew. He then went to her part-time job, a small cafe near campus. The owner said Audrey always left early, never went anywhere with strangers. But in the week before her disappearance, she had changed, checking the clock often, startled easily when someone called her name. And once, she dropped an entire stack of cups while washing dishes. She said she was just tired, but according to the owner, that wasn't like Audrey at all. Another strange detail. Another mismatched puzzle piece. On the third night, Michael stayed at the station. His office light was once again the last one still on. Dozens of photos of Audrey were spread across the table. A map with red circles marking the paths she could have taken. Files on friends, family, phone data, everything. But none of it spoke. None of it pointed anywhere. He leaned back in his chair, exhausted. Eyes dry from 2 sleepless nights. Some cases felt like running with no finish line. But Audrey's case felt even worse. It felt like walking through a dark room with only a flickering flashlight. And every time he approached a clue, the light dimmed. But he didn't quit. He couldn't. Not with the image of Audrey's mother in the waiting room still in his mind. Not with the entire town hoping he'd find what they couldn't. Not when something in this case seemed to whisper to him, "Keep going. The answer is out there. Maybe just one step away." That night, as he prepared to leave, an officer ran up with a printed file, new footage from a traffic camera, almost 2 miles from where Audrey disappeared. And in 13 seconds of that video, something made Michael's heart drop. A figure. Not clear. Not identifiable. But clearly watching the area where Audrey passed. A figure standing still. Then disappearing just seconds before Audrey left the camera's view. For the first time since the case began, Michael felt he had truly touched something important. No one knew who that figure was or why they appeared at that exact time. But Michael knew this was the first real lead. And if there was one thing he believed, it was this. In every missing person case, nothing is a coincidence. The mysterious figure made the investigation room tense like a stretched wire. When they zoomed in, Michael noticed the figure stood only a few meters from the roadside, close enough to watch Audrey, close enough to act, but not clear enough to identify. What struck him was the posture. Standing straight, hands in their coat pockets, staring at the path Audrey would take. Not someone casually waiting. Someone waiting for the right person. Over the next 2 days, Michael and the analysis team reviewed every camera within several more miles. Finally, they found something crucial. Minutes before Audrey left her building, a gray pickup truck parked on a nearby street. The license plate was unreadable due to glare, But in a brief moment, the driver stepped out. And the figure's build, when compared to the earlier footage, looked very similar. Michael immediately sent the truck images to all patrol units. Within hours, one report came back. The truck belonged to a man named Daniel Grant, 36, freelancer. Lived alone outside town. And what caught Michael's attention most, Daniel had once been in a relationship with Audrey 6 months earlier. A relationship that didn't end well. According to public records, Audrey had filed a restraining order against him due to persistent messages after their breakup. She said she felt watched. Said she heard footsteps outside her apartment window at night. Said she often felt someone walking behind her when she came home late. Reading that made Michael's chest tighten. Why didn't Audrey report again? Why did she think it was just a small matter? When rumors about Daniel spread, the small town exploded like an undercurrent. A man once accused of harassment. A truck caught on camera near the scene. A figure matching his build. To many people, that was enough. They whispered in cafes, in grocery stores, at the university. They believed Daniel had done something terrible. And when police knocked on Daniel's door, the entire town nearly exhaled in relief. They believed the culprit had been found. Daniel opened the door looking confused and tense. Tall guy, messy hair, dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept in days. When Michael showed him the footage of the truck, Daniel bowed his head for a long time. Then, when Michael showed him the footage of the car, Daniel lowered his head for a long time. Then, he let out a heavy breath and said, "I knew this would come back for me. But I didn't do anything to Audrey." Those words made Michael study him more closely. Daniel's voice trembled, not with guilt, but with the kind of shaking you see in someone trapped between fear and helplessness. But feelings couldn't replace evidence. Michael still had to bring him in for questioning. In the interrogation room, Daniel admitted he had driven near that area the night Audrey disappeared. But he insisted he never saw her, never approached her, never followed her. He said he was only driving around to clear his head because work was hard, because life felt heavy, because he had no one left to talk to. Michael listened and took notes, but doubt still lingered. Daniel had been too close to the scene. Daniel also admitted he had texted Audrey many times. He said he couldn't get over the breakup, but he insisted he never threatened her, never hurt her, never intended to harm her. His words, though earnest, still weren't enough. Meanwhile, news that Daniel was being held spread quickly across town. In the supermarket parking lot, people pointed at the headlines. In the breakfast diner, conversations turned sharp. Some said they had seen Daniel watching Audrey from afar. Some said they'd heard about the arguments. A few were angry. A few felt relieved. Finally, they said, they found the guy. Even Audrey's mother collapsed when she heard Daniel's name. She had known her daughter was once followed, but she never imagined the man might still be lurking near her on the night she vanished. She sat silently in the police station waiting room, lips trembling, hands clutching Audrey's favorite silk scarf. Everyone wanted to believe the case was about to be solved. But to Michael, that certainty made his spine turn cold. After 3 days of questioning, after hours reviewing every second of footage, after digging through Daniel's phone logs, Michael began to see the cracks. Too many things didn't align. Daniel's whereabouts during certain hours were confirmed by witnesses. His messages to Audrey had stopped weeks earlier. Traffic cameras showed his car heading in the opposite direction immediately after he left the area near Audrey's home. But the real turning point was the timestamp. When Michael analyzed each frame precisely, he discovered the mysterious figure appeared nearly half a mile away from where Daniel parked, at the exact time Daniel was still in his car. If Daniel had been the one following Audrey, he couldn't have been in two distant places at the same moment. A puzzle piece that once looked perfect no longer fit the picture at all. When Michael entered the final findings into his report, his heart grew heavy. Not because Daniel was innocent or guilty, but because he knew this case was far from simple, and the community's belief in the wrong man might have pushed them dangerously off track. Finally, Michael stepped into the holding cell and looked at Daniel one last time. Daniel lifted his head, eyes red but gaze steady. Michael spoke in a firm, low voice. "You're being released. There's no evidence linking you to Audrey's disappearance." Daniel stared at him for a long moment, then whispered, caught between relief and heartbreak. "Then, who took her?" Michael didn't answer because he had none. But he knew one thing. They had wasted too much time in this dead end. And the real figure, hiding in the dark, was still out there, watching, waiting, maybe even smiling as they walked the wrong path. The case returned to zero, but this time it carried a more terrifying truth. The person behind Audrey's disappearance was smarter than they thought, quieter than they imagined, and far more dangerous than anyone expected. On what seemed like an ordinary morning, the detective received a detail so small that everyone initially dismissed it. A road near the victim's home had been temporarily closed on the night she vanished. No one paid attention. Road closures were common in the city. But for him, it was like a cold wind slipping through a cracked door. Then a statement once considered insignificant resurfaced in his mind. An elderly witness, living alone, someone police usually listen to only out of courtesy, said he saw the girl turn onto that road. That testimony had been ignored because it didn't match the camera data. But now, knowing the road was blocked, everything changed color. The detective froze. He realized the entire investigation might have been led astray, not because of negligence, but because people naturally cling to the obvious and overlook the small things. The case shifted, and he felt it deep inside. Truth is patient. It waits for those determined enough to hear what seems unimportant. As old clues regained life, the team decided to take a bold step. They fed every piece of data into the newest forensic simulation system technology, capable of reconstructing the night she disappeared in real time. Not just routes or movement speeds, but streetlight reflections, wind direction, and the dark pockets cameras couldn't reach. The detective stood behind the experts, hands tense. To him, this wasn't just science. It was the last chance to give a voice back to a girl who had vanished on a quiet night. When the simulation reached a critical moment, everyone leaned closer. Then it appeared a tiny time discrepancy no human could detect, but technology could. It opened a completely different route, a theory no one had ever considered. The detective inhaled slowly. He could feel the truth drawing nearer, not loud or dramatic, just the steady persistence of science and of people who refused to give up. When the simulation finished, the puzzle pieces suddenly snapped into a chillingly straight line. The newly reconstructed route led to an area with no cameras, a forgotten patch of darkness. The team returned to the scene immediately. Under dried leaves and dust, they found tire tracks matching the simulation. A small detail, but sharp enough to pierce the fog of the case. The detective stood quietly on that road. He knew that without the technology, this angle might never have surfaced. They traced the path back, rebuilding the movements of someone long believed to be irrelevant. And when the truth emerged, the entire team paused, not from shock, but from feeling the cold edge of reality. The arrest happened late in the afternoon. Sunset cast a deep orange glow across the neighborhood. As the handcuffs clicked shut, the detective looked at the man and felt no triumph, only the sadness of a story no one wanted to tell. But within that sadness was something else. Finally, the girl had someone standing on her side. When the case closed, the detective didn't celebrate. He simply stood by his worn desk and exhaled slowly. For weeks, he had lived with unanswered questions and sleepless nights over a girl he had never met. But at the end of the journey, he understood. Persistence is what lights the way. Justice doesn't always come from big evidence, but from refusing to overlook the smallest detail. During the meeting with the victim's family, the detective didn't give a grand speech. He simply placed his hand on the table and said their daughter had not been forgotten, and that through all those long days, the team carried her in their hearts. The family went silent. Their pain didn't vanish, but they felt comfort. At least the truth had been found. The case changed the entire police department. They upgraded their forensic systems, reopened old cold files, and retrained officers on evaluating witnesses. Everyone understood now, no detail is meaningless. No witness is too small. As the city returned to its normal rhythm, one thing remained. Sometimes, the only thing keeping truth alive is human patience. And every name, every story, deserves to be heard to the very end.